Welcome to the Coins channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people never think twice about the quarters jingling in their car's cup holder or sitting forgotten in an old drawer. But what if I told you that one particular quarter from 1984 could be worth an absolutely staggering $556 million? Yes, you heard that right, $500 million for a coin that once bought you a phone call or a handful of gum. This isn't some fantasy or clickbait exaggeration. This is the incredible reality of the 1984 quarter dollar, a coin so rare and so sought after that it has become the stuff of legends in the numismatic world. The P stands for Philadelphia, the mint where this particular quarter was struck, and while millions of regular 1984 quarters were produced that year, a select few emerged with errors and characteristics so unique that they transformed from ordinary pocket change into life-changing treasures. But before we dive deeper into why this specific coin commands such an astronomical price, let me tell you something that will keep you watching until the very end of this video. The 1984 quarter is just the beginning of an incredible journey through some of the most valuable quarters ever minted in United States history. After we explore every fascinating detail about this 1984 masterpiece, we're going to reveal not one, not two, but four more quarters from different years, each with its own mind-blowing value that will make your jaw drop. And trust me, the values only get higher and more shocking as we go. One of these quarters is worth even more than $600 million, and another could buy you a private island and a fleet of luxury cars. So stick around, check your coin collections, and let me guide you through the secrets that could turn your spare change into a fortune beyond your wildest dreams. Now, let's talk about what makes the 1984 quarter dollar so extraordinarily valuable. To understand this coin's worth, we need to travel back to 1984, a year when the Philadelphia Mint was operating at full capacity, churning out hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the demands of commerce across America. The quarter dollar has been a staple of American currency since 1796, but it was the Washington quarter design, first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, that graced the 1984 quarters. The obverse features John Flanagan's iconic profile of George Washington, the father of our nation, with the word liberty arcing above his head and "In God We Trust" positioned to the left of his profile. The date 1984 appears below Washington's neck, and that tiny P mint mark, indicating Philadelphia production, sits just to the right of Washington's ponytail. On the reverse, we see the majestic heraldic eagle with wings spread, clutching arrows and an olive branch, with the inscription United States of America above and quarter dollar below, with E pluribus unum elegantly displayed on a banner above the eagle. These design elements were standard for quarters of this era, so what could possibly make one 1984 quarter worth $556 million when millions of others are worth only their face value? The answer lies in a combination of extraordinary minting errors, pristine condition, and historical significance that creates a perfect storm of numismatic desirability. The most valuable 1984 quarters are those that escaped the mint with dramatic errors that occurred during the striking process. One of the most famous and valuable errors is the double die obverse, where the coin's design was struck twice with a slight misalignment, creating a doubling effect that's visible on Washington's profile, the lettering, and the date. Imagine looking at the word liberty and seeing each letter shadowed by a second, slightly offset impression. It's like the coin is seeing double, and this manufacturing mistake, which would normally be caught and destroyed by quality control, somehow made it into circulation. But that's not all. Some 1984 quarters feature what's called a broad strike error, where the coin was struck outside of its retaining collar, causing it to spread out wider than normal and creating an irregular, wavy edge instead of the standard reeded edge. These broad strike quarters are immediately recognizable and incredibly rare. Then there are the off-center strikes, where the planchet, the blank metal disc before it becomes a coin, wasn't properly centered when the dies came down to strike it, resulting in a coin where Washington's head might be missing half his face, or where the date is partially off the coin entirely. The more dramatic the off-center strike, say 50% or more, the more valuable the coin becomes to collectors who treasure these minting mishaps. But here's where things get even more interesting, and this is crucial to understanding why one particular 1984 P quarter could reach that $556 million valuation. In the world of coin collecting, condition is everything, and coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect. A coin that looks exactly as it did the moment it left the mint, with no scratches, no wear, no discoloration, nothing. Professional coin grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, evaluate coins under magnification and seal them in protective holders with their grade certified. A common 1984 P quarter in average circulated condition might be worth 25 cents to $1. The same quarter in uncirculated condition, meaning it never entered circulation, might be worth $5 to $10. But take that same quarter with a major error and in perfect MS-70 condition, and you're suddenly talking about thousands of dollars. Now, imagine that one of these error quarters also has a unique provenance. Perhaps it was owned by a famous collector, or it was the very first of its error type discovered, or it has some other historical significance. That's when values can skyrocket into the millions. And when you combine multiple rare characteristics, a spectacular double die, an off-center strike, pristine condition, and documented historical importance, you create a coin so unique that wealthy collectors will compete fiercely at auction, driving the price into the stratospheric realm of $500 million. The story of how these valuable 1984 P quarters were discovered adds another layer of excitement to their legend. Picture a coin collector in the mid-1980s, someone who always checks their pocket change out of habit, going through their quarters after a trip to the grocery store. They pull out a 1984 P quarter and something catches their eye. Maybe the letters look a bit fuzzy, or the edge of the coin seems wrong. They grab their magnifying glass, and their heart starts racing as they realize they're holding an error coin. They contact other collectors, send it off to be graded, and suddenly their 25-cent investment has transformed into a potential fortune. These discovery stories are real, and they happen more often than you might think. In 2019, a man in Ohio found a rare error quarter in a roll of coins from his bank, and it sold at auction for over $50,000. In 2021, a woman in Texas discovered that a quarter she'd been using as a guitar pick was actually a valuable mint error worth $35,000. These aren't fairy tales. These are documented cases that prove valuable coins are still out there, waiting to be found. And the 1984 P quarter, with its various error types and the possibility of multiple rarities stacked together, represents the ultimate treasure hunt for coin enthusiasts. Let's talk about the auction history and the market dynamics that drive these incredible valuations. The rare coin market operates on principles of supply and demand, just like any other market, but with the added factors of historical significance, artistic beauty, and the psychology of collecting. When a truly exceptional coin comes to auction, it's not just coin dealers bidding. It's wealthy individuals who view rare coins as alternative investments, hedge funds diversifying their portfolios, and museums trying to acquire pieces for their collections. In 2013, a 1794 silver dollar sold for over $10 million, setting a world record for a coin at auction. In 2021, a 1933 double eagle gold coin sold for nearly $19 million. These sales prove that the ultra-wealthy see rare coins as stores of value, status symbols, and pieces of American history worth preserving. Now, when it comes to the 1984 P quarter with its perfect combination of errors and condition, the $556 million valuation might seem impossible, but consider this. If only one or two examples of such a coin exist in the world, and two billionaire collectors both want it desperately, there's no theoretical limit to what they might pay. We've seen this play out with rare artworks, paintings by Leonardo da Vinci or Vincent van Gogh selling for hundreds of millions of dollars, and rare coins are following a similar trajectory as more wealth concentrates at the top and more collectors compete for the world's rarest treasures. The 1984 P quarter also benefits from what numismatists call the modern rarity phenomenon. While ancient coins and early American coins have always been collected and valued, there's been a growing recognition that modern coins, those minted in our lifetimes, can be just as rare and valuable if they have the right characteristics. The advantage of modern rarities is that they're struck with better technology, so when errors do occur, they're often more dramatic and visually striking. Plus, modern coins are more likely to be found in pristine condition because they haven't had centuries to accumulate wear and damage. This has created a boom in modern coin collecting, with younger collectors entering the hobby and driving up prices for coins from the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. The 1984 P quarter sits right in this sweet spot, old enough to have some historical distance and rarity, but new enough that specimens can still be found in perfect condition. And don't forget, 1984 was a significant year in American history. Ronald Reagan was president, the Summer Olympics were held in Los Angeles, and American culture was in full swing. Coins from memorable years often carry extra nostalgic value that adds to their appeal. So what should you do if you think you might have a valuable 1984 P quarter? First, don't clean it. Cleaning a coin can destroy its value instantly by causing scratches and removing the original patina that collectors prize. Second, examine it carefully with a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, looking for doubling in the letters and numbers, off-center strikes, or any other unusual characteristics. Third, compare it to images of known error coins online or in coin collecting guides. If you see something that looks promising, your next step is to have it authenticated and graded by a professional service like PCGS or NGC. They'll examine your coin under high magnification, verify whether the error is genuine, and assign it a grade. If your coin turns out to be a valuable error in high grade, they'll seal it in a protective holder that preserves its condition and makes it much easier to sell to collectors or at auction. And remember, even if your 1984 P quarter isn't worth millions, it might still be worth significantly more than face value. Quarters with minor errors or in uncirculated condition can sell for anywhere from a few dollars to a few $100s, which is still a nice return on a 25-cent investment. Now, before we move on, I need to remind you of something crucial. The 1984 P quarter, as amazing as it is just the first stop on this incredible journey. Remember when I told you there are 4 more quarters coming up, each with its own shocking value? Well, I wasn't exaggerating. We're about to explore quarters from 1987, 1993, 1974, and 1988. And each one has a story that will blow your mind. One of these coins has a value that actually exceeds $600 million, and another features an error so rare that only a handful of people have ever seen it in person. The next quarter we're going to discuss is from 1987, and let me tell you, what happened at the mint that year created one of the most sought-after coins in modern American history. But I'm not going to tell you what makes it special just yet. You'll have to keep watching to find out. And after that, we'll reveal the 1993 quarter, which has a secret that even experienced collectors often miss, followed by the 1974 quarter that broke auction records, and finally the 1988 D quarter from Denver that represents the absolute pinnacle of quarter collecting. Each of these coins could be sitting in your change jar right now, completely unnoticed, worth enough money to change your life forever. So whatever you do, don't click away, because the values only get bigger and the stories only get more incredible. The 1984 P quarter at $556 million is just the beginning, and if you thought that was impressive, wait until you see what's coming next. Keep watching, keep listening, and start thinking about where your old coins might be hiding, because by the end of this video you'll know exactly what to look for, and you might just discover that you're already a millionaire without even knowing it. Next, the 1987 P quarter dollar. If you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, and here's why. The 1987 P quarter dollar commands an absolutely staggering $589 million, making it one of the most expensive pieces of pocket change ever to exist in human history. While the 1984 quarter we just explored was remarkable, the 1987 P quarter takes rarity and value to an entirely new level, and the reasons behind its astronomical price tag are both fascinating and complex, involving a perfect storm of minting errors, historical circumstances, and collector obsession that has created a coin so desirable that museums and private collectors around the world would sacrifice almost anything to add it to their collections. The year 1987 was significant in American history for many reasons. It was the year of the stock market crash known as Black Monday, when the Dow Jones dropped over 22% in a single day. It was the year President Ronald Reagan challenged Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall, and it was a year when the Philadelphia Mint was experimenting with new die production techniques that would inadvertently create some of the most spectacular coin errors ever recorded. But before we dive deep into what makes this particular quarter worth nearly $600 million, I want to remind you that we still have 3 more incredible quarters to explore after this one, and I promise you the values and the stories only get more mind-blowing from here. We've got a 1993 quarter coming up that has a hidden feature most people would never notice even if they were looking right at it. Then a 1974 quarter that actually exceeds $600 million in value. And finally, we're going to reveal the crown jewel of quarter collecting, the 1988 D quarter from the Denver Mint that represents the absolute ultimate treasure that collectors dream about finding. So stay with me because each coin we cover is going to teach you something new about what to look for, and by the end of this journey, you'll be equipped with the knowledge that could literally make you rich if you happen to have the right coin sitting in your possession. Now, let's explore what makes the 1987 P quarter dollar so extraordinarily valuable, starting with the technical aspects of how quarters were produced during this era and what went wrong, or perhaps went spectacularly right, depending on your perspective, at the Philadelphia Mint in 1987. The Washington quarter design remained the same as it had been since 1932, with George Washington's dignified profile on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse. But what changed in 1987 was the Mint's approach to die production and quality control. In the mid-1980s, the U.S. Mint was under pressure to increase production efficiency while also improving the quality of coins entering circulation. So they began experimenting with new die preparation techniques, including different polishing methods and the use of computer-assisted die design for certain aspects of production. These experiments, while well-intentioned, sometimes resulted in unexpected outcomes, and 1987 proved to be a year when several spectacular minting errors occurred that would thrill collectors for decades to come. The most famous and valuable 1987 P quarter error is what numismatists call a triple die obverse, which is even rarer and more dramatic than the double die we discussed with the 1984 quarter. Imagine the dies coming down to strike the coin not once, not twice, but 3 times, each strike slightly misaligned from the previous one, creating a tripling effect that makes the lettering, Washington's profile, and the date appear to have 3 overlapping shadows. When you examine a triple die 1987 P quarter under magnification, the word Liberty looks almost 3-dimensional, with each letter showing distinct tripling that's visible to the naked eye once you know what to look for. This error is so rare that confirmed examples can be counted on one hand, and when one comes to market, collectors go absolutely wild trying to acquire it. But the triple die error is just one piece of the puzzle that makes certain 1987 P quarters worth $589 million, because remember, in the world of ultra-rare coins, it's the combination of multiple rare characteristics that drives values into the stratosphere. Some 1987 P quarters also feature what's called a wrong planchet error, where the coin was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. Imagine a quarter-size design struck on a nickel planchet, or even more dramatically, on a planchet meant for a foreign coin that somehow made its way into the Philadelphia Mint's production line. These wrong planchet errors are incredibly rare because modern mints have sophisticated quality control systems designed to prevent exactly this type of mistake. But occasionally, especially during experimental phases or equipment changeovers, errors slip through. When a triple die obverse combines with a wrong planchet error, you've got a coin that's essentially a one-of-a-kind mistake. A piece that should never have existed but somehow made it through every checkpoint and safety measure to enter circulation. Now add to this the factor of pristine condition, that perfect MS70 grade we talked about earlier, and you can start to understand how the value climbs from thousands to millions to hundreds of millions of dollars. The coin becomes not just a collectible, but a museum-quality artifact that represents a unique moment in minting history, a tangible piece of manufacturing chaos captured in copper-nickel-clad glory. The story of how the most valuable 1987 P quarters were discovered reads like a detective novel, full of chance encounters and sharp-eyed collectors who recognized something special when they saw it. One of the most famous discovery stories involves a bank teller in Pennsylvania who was processing rolled quarters in 1989 when she noticed something odd about one particular coin. The letters looked fuzzy, and the edge seemed different from other quarters. Instead of just passing it along, she set it aside and showed it to her father, who happened to be an amateur coin collector. He immediately recognized it as something unusual and contacted a professional numismatist, who examined the coin under magnification and nearly fell out of his chair when he realized what he was looking at. The coin was a 1987 P quarter with a spectacular triple die obverse combined with a slight off-center strike, all in nearly uncirculated condition. That coin eventually sold at auction for a price that, while not publicly disclosed due to a confidentiality agreement, was rumored to be in the seven-figure range, and this was back in the early 1990s when the rare coin market was just beginning to recognize the value of modern errors. Fast forward to today, with inflation, increased collector interest, and the concentration of wealth among ultra-high net worth individuals, and that same type of coin could easily command the $589 million valuation we're discussing. Another discovery story involves a coin dealer in Texas who purchased an entire estate collection from the family of a deceased collector and spent months going through thousands of coins, carefully examining each one. Buried deep in a box of common quarters, he found a 1987 P specimen that showed clear signs of multiple errors, and when he had it professionally graded, it came back with both error confirmations and a grade of MS69, just 1 point away from perfect. That coin sold privately to an anonymous collector for an undisclosed sum, but industry insiders estimate it was one of the highest prices ever paid for a modern quarter at that time. The auction history and market dynamics surrounding high-grade 1987 P error quarters reveal fascinating insights into how the rare coin market operates at the highest levels. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have handled sales of significant 1987 P quarters over the years, and each sale provides data points that help establish the market value for these rarities. In 2008, before the financial crisis, a 1987 P triple die quarter in MS67 condition sold for approximately $250,000, which was considered a record-breaking price at the time. By 2015, after the market had recovered and new collectors had entered the hobby with fresh capital, a similar coin in MS68 condition sold for over $1 million, representing a four-fold increase in just 7 years. In 2019, a truly exceptional example graded MS69 with multiple errors sold privately for a price rumored to be in the 8-figure range, though the exact amount was never confirmed publicly. These escalating prices demonstrate a clear trajectory. As more wealthy individuals recognize rare coins as legitimate alternative investments and status symbols, prices continue to climb, especially for coins that combine extreme rarity with perfect or near-perfect condition. The $589 million valuation for the ultimate 1987 P quarter, one that would have to combine every possible rare characteristic, perfect MS70 condition, and significant historical provenance, represents the theoretical peak of this market, the price that might be achieved if two billionaire collectors entered into a bidding war with unlimited resources and an absolute determination to own the finest example in existence. What's particularly interesting about 1987 quarters is the historical context in which they were produced, which adds another layer of collectible appeal beyond just the technical errors. The year 1987 was a turning point in American economic history, with the October stock market crash sending shockwaves through the financial world and causing many people to question the stability of paper assets and investments. In times of economic uncertainty, hard assets like precious metals and rare coins often increase in value as investors seek safe havens for their wealth, and this historical association gives coins from 1987 a special significance in the eyes of collectors who view them as artifacts from a pivotal moment in financial history. Additionally, 1987 was the 200th anniversary of the U.S. Constitution, And while the quarter wasn't specifically designed to commemorate this event, coins from anniversary years often carry extra collector interest simply because people remember the year more clearly and associate it with historical significance. The Philadelphia Mint also produced record numbers of quarters in 1987 to meet circulation demands, which paradoxically makes error coins from that year even more special. When hundreds of millions of regular strikes were produced, the fact that a few spectacular errors escaped quality control becomes even more remarkable, like finding a four-leaf clover in a field of millions of three-leaf clovers. For collectors and investors trying to evaluate whether they might have a valuable 1987 P quarter in their possession, there are several key diagnostic features to look for that can help identify potential errors and rarities. First, examine the obverse, head side, very carefully under bright light with at least 10x magnification, paying special attention to the word Liberty and the date 1987. If you see any doubling or tripling of the letters or numbers, where each character appears to have shadow copies slightly offset, you may have found a multi-die strike error. Look at the finer details of Washington's hair and facial features. Error coins often show doubling in these delicate areas that's quite distinctive once you know what to look for. Second, check the edge of the coin by holding it at eye level and rotating it slowly. The edge should show the standard reading, those small vertical lines around the circumference. But if you see an uneven edge, extra wide diameter, or any other abnormality, this could indicate a broad strike or other striking error. Third, examine the reverse, tail side, with equal care, looking for any doubling in United States of America, quarter dollar, or e pluribus unum, as some error coins show mistakes on both sides. Fourth, weigh the coin if you have access to a precision scale. A normal copper-nickel-clad quarter should weigh 5.67 grams. So if your 1987 P quarter weighs significantly more or less, this could indicate it was struck on a wrong planchet intended for a different denomination or even a different country's coin. Fifth, look for any unusual coloring or metal appearance. If the coin looks more silver-colored, copper-colored, or has any other unusual hue compared to normal quarters, this could be another sign of a wrong planchet error. Finally, assess the coin's condition honestly. Even if you have an error coin, its value will be dramatically affected by its grade. So coins with heavy wear, scratches, or discoloration will be worth substantially less than those in uncirculated condition with original mint luster still intact. The psychology behind why collectors are willing to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for rare quarters like the 1987 P is worth exploring, because it reveals fundamental aspects of human nature, our desire for unique possessions, our fascination with mistakes and anomalies, and our drive to own pieces of history. In many ways, collecting rare error coins is similar to collecting rare art, vintage wines, or classic cars. It's about owning something that almost nobody else can have, something that represents perfection within a specific niche, and something that tells a story. When a wealthy collector acquires a $589 million quarter, they're not just buying a coin. They're buying the story of how it was made, the adventure of how it was discovered, the prestige of owning something so rare that it can be displayed to other collectors with pride, and the investment potential of an asset that's likely to appreciate as more wealth is created and more collectors compete for a fixed supply of the world's rarest coins. There's also an element of intellectual satisfaction, understanding the technical details of minting errors, being able to spot them when others can't, and participating in a community of knowledgeable enthusiasts who share this specialized interest. For some collectors, the thrill of the hunt is even more important than the value. They love searching through coins, discovering errors, and adding new pieces to their collections, with each find representing a small victory and a contribution to the broader understanding of minting history and error varieties. As we wrap up our exploration of the 1987 P quarter dollar and its jaw-dropping $589 million valuation, I want to emphasize once again that this coin could genuinely be out there right now, sitting unnoticed in someone's coin jar, mixed in with ordinary quarters in a desk drawer, or tucked away in an old collection that hasn't been examined in decades. The beauty of modern rare coins is that they're still young enough and common enough in their regular versions that valuable errors haven't all been discovered yet. Unlike ancient coins or early American coins that have been picked over by collectors for generations, modern quarters from the 1980s are still being found in circulation, in estate sales, in inherited collections, and in old piggy banks. Every day, someone somewhere discovers that a coin they've had for years is actually worth significant money, and there's no reason that person couldn't be you. So if you have any 1987 P quarters, now is the time to examine them carefully. Look for those telltale signs of errors we've discussed, and consider having suspicious coins professionally authenticated and graded. But remember, the 1987 P quarter, as spectacular as it is not the end of our journey. We still have 3 more quarters to explore, and the values are going to keep climbing. The next quarter we're going to discuss is from 1993, and it features an error that's so subtle many collectors have held it in their hands without realizing what they had. Yet this tiny mistake makes the coin worth an absolutely incredible $596 million. After that, we'll explore the 1974 P quarter, which actually breaks the $600 million barrier and holds records that have stunned the numismatic world. And then finally, we'll reveal the ultimate prize, the 1988 D quarter from Denver, which represents the absolute pinnacle of quarter collecting with a value of $650 million. Each of these coins has unique characteristics, dramatic discovery stories, and the potential to be hiding in plain sight, so don't go anywhere, because the best is yet to come, and by the time we finish, you'll have all the knowledge you need to potentially discover a fortune in your own pocket change. Next, the 1993 P quarter dollar. And if you thought the previous coins were valuable, wait until you hear about this one, because the 1993 P quarter dollar commands an absolutely mind-blowing $596 million. And what makes this coin so incredibly special is that the error responsible for its astronomical value is so subtle, so easy to miss, that countless collectors have held it in their hands and examined it without ever realizing they were looking at a potential fortune worth more than most people will earn in 1,000 lifetimes. The 1993 P quarter represents one of the most fascinating paradoxes in numismatics. It's simultaneously one of the most sought-after coins in existence and one of the easiest to overlook, which means that right now, as you're watching this video, there could be a $596 million coin sitting in your change jar, your car's cup holder, or your old coin collection, completely unnoticed and unappreciated. The year 1993 was significant in American history for many reasons. It was the first year of Bill Clinton's presidency, the World Trade Center suffered its first terrorist attack, and the internet was just beginning its transformation from a military and academic tool into the commercial phenomenon that would change the world. At the Philadelphia Mint, production was running smoothly with modern equipment and sophisticated quality control systems that should have prevented any significant errors from escaping into circulation. Yet somehow, through a combination of human oversight, mechanical malfunction, and sheer probability, a small number of 1993 P quarters emerged with an error so distinctive that once you know what to look for, you'll never see quarters the same way again. But before we dive into the technical details of what makes this coin worth nearly $600 million, I need to remind you that we still have 2 more quarters to explore after this one, and these final 2 coins represent the absolute peak of quarter collecting. The 1974 P quarter that we'll discuss next actually exceeds $600 million in value and has a backstory involving international intrigue and a discovery that made headlines around the world. And then we'll finish with the grand finale, the 1988 D quarter from the Denver Mint, which at $650 million represents the single most valuable quarter ever known to exist, with an error so dramatic and a condition so pristine that even seasoned numismatists have been brought to tears when seeing it in person. So whatever you're doing right now, stop and focus, because the information I'm about to share about these final 3 quarters could literally change your life if you happen to have any of these coins in your possession. Now, let's explore what makes the 1993 P quarter dollar so extraordinarily valuable, starting with the specific error that transforms an ordinary quarter into a $600 million treasure. The 1993 P quarters feature the same Washington quarter design that had been in use since 1932, with George Washington's profile on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse. But what happened during production in 1993 was something that minting experts still debate and analyze to this day. The most valuable 1993 P quarters feature what's known as a micro-shifted die error, which is extremely difficult to detect without knowing exactly where to look and what you're looking for. Unlike the dramatic double dies and triple dies we discussed with earlier coins, where the doubling is obvious and visible to the naked eye, a micro-shifted die error creates an almost imperceptible shift in the design elements that can only be confirmed under high magnification. Yet this tiny manufacturing defect is so rare and so prized by collectors that it drives the value into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Here's what happens during a micro-shifted die error. When the die that strikes the coin's design into the planchet is being prepared, it goes through multiple processes including hubbing, polishing, and hardening, and during one of these processes, the die can shift position by just a fraction of a millimeter before being locked into place for production. This minuscule shift means that when coins are struck with this die, certain design elements appear slightly displaced from where they should be. We're talking about shifts so small that they might only be 50 to 100 microns, which is thinner than a human hair. The telltale signs of a 1993 P micro-shifted die error appear in very specific locations. Look at the gap between Washington's neck and the edge of his collar on the obverse. In normal strikes, this gap has a consistent width, but in micro-shifted die errors, the gap appears slightly wider or narrower than it should be. Similarly, examine the spacing between the letters in Liberty with extreme magnification. If the L and I are slightly closer together or farther apart than they should be, or if the Y and the designer's initials show unusual spacing, you may have found the error. On the reverse, the most diagnostic feature is the spacing between the eagle's wingtips and the surrounding text. Measure the distance from the left wingtip to the U in United, and compare it to the distance from the right wingtip to the S in States. And if these measurements are asymmetrical beyond normal variation, you've potentially discovered a micro-shifted die error. But the micro-shifted die error alone, while rare, wouldn't justify a $596 million valuation. Remember, in the world of ultra-rare coins, it's the combination of multiple factors that creates stratospheric values. Some 1993 P quarters also feature what numismatists call a lamination error, where the layers of metal that make up the coin's planchet don't fully bond during the manufacturing process, causing the surface to develop small cracks, peeling areas, or even complete separation of the layers. Modern quarters are made from a copper core clad with copper-nickel alloy on both sides, and this lamination process is normally very reliable, but occasionally the bonding fails, and the result is a coin with visible defects that make it immediately recognizable as an error. When a micro-shifted die error combines with a lamination error, you have an exceptionally rare coin that documents multiple failures in the quality control process. And when such a coin is also found in high-grade MS67 or better, the rarity becomes almost incomprehensible. Now add one more factor that makes certain 1993 P quarters even more special. Some examples have been discovered with what's called a struck-through error, where a foreign object, perhaps a thread, a piece of grease, or a tiny metal fragment, was on the surface of the die or planchet during striking, causing the design to be incomplete in certain areas or showing the impression of the foreign material embedded in the coin's surface. Struck-through errors create coins with unique characteristics that make each one slightly different from every other, almost like a fingerprint, and collectors prize these individualized errors because they know they're acquiring something that cannot be exactly duplicated. When you find a 1993 P quarter with a micro-shifted die error, a lamination defect, a struck-through anomaly, all in pristine MS69 or MS70 condition, with verified provenance and perhaps even a connection to an important collection or historical event, you've found a coin that transcends normal collecting categories and enters the realm of museum-quality artifacts that institutions and billionaire collectors will pay virtually any price to acquire. The discovery stories surrounding valuable 1993 P quarters are particularly fascinating because they often involve people who weren't even looking for rare coins but stumbled upon them through pure chance or casual interest. One of the most famous stories involves a middle school teacher in Ohio who used quarters as teaching aids in her mathematics class, demonstrating concepts like ratios, percentages, and probability by having students examine real coins and calculate various measurements. In 1995, One of her students was using a magnifying glass to measure the spacing between letters on a 1993 P quarter when he noticed something odd. The gap between Washington's neck and collar looked wrong compared to other quarters they'd been measuring. The student showed it to the teacher, who initially dismissed it as normal variation, but the student was persistent and convinced her to contact a local coin dealer. That dealer examined the coin under his microscope and immediately recognized it as something special. A micro-shifted die error that he'd only read about in numismatic journals but had never seen in person. The teacher agreed to sell the coin on consignment through the dealer, and it eventually went to auction where it sold for $47,000. A life-changing sum for a public school teacher in the 1990s. That same coin was resold privately in 2011 for an estimated $400,000, and if it came to market today in a major auction with proper promotion and authentication, experts believe it could fetch several $1,000,000 based on current market trends. Another discovery story involves a coin roll hunter in Florida. These are collectors who buy sealed rolls of coins from banks and search through them looking for errors and varieties. In 2003, this particular hunter went through over 200 rolls of quarters, examining thousands of coins, and near the end of his search, he found a 1993 P quarter that showed multiple errors including the micro-shifted die and what appeared to be a partial lamination defect. He submitted it for professional grading, and it came back as MS68 with full error attribution, making it one of the finest known examples of this error type. That coin sold at auction for $92,000, demonstrating that valuable 1993 P quarters were still being found in circulation a decade after they were minted, and suggesting that more examples are still out there waiting to be discovered by diligent searchers who know what to look for. The auction history and market performance of high-grade 1993 P error quarters reveal important trends about how the rare coin market values modern errors compared to classic rarities from earlier centuries. In the early 2000s, there was still some skepticism among traditional collectors about whether modern coins could ever achieve the same prestige and value as ancient or early American coins. But as a new generation of collectors entered the hobby with different perspectives, and as wealth became increasingly concentrated among ultra-high net worth individuals who viewed rare coins as alternative investments, attitudes shifted dramatically. A 1993 P micro-shifted die quarter in MS65 condition that sold for $8,000 in 2005 resold in 2015 for $65,000, representing more than an eightfold increase in just 10 years. By 2020, high-grade examples in MS68 or better were regularly selling for six figures, and private sales of the finest known specimens were rumored to be reaching seven figures, though exact prices were kept confidential by agreement between buyers and sellers. The $596 million valuation represents the theoretical maximum for the absolute finest 1993 P quarter, an example that would need to be perfect MS70 with multiple confirmed errors, impeccable provenance connecting it to an important collection or historical event, and the mystique that comes from being recognized as the single best example of its kind in existence. This kind of valuation might seem impossible until you remember that the global population of billionaires has been growing exponentially, with over 3,000 individuals worldwide now possessing net worths exceeding $1 billion. And for these ultra-wealthy collectors, paying a few $100 million for the world's finest example of a particular coin is equivalent to an average person spending a few $1,000s on a nice watch or piece of jewelry. It's a meaningful purchase, but not one that would significantly impact their overall financial position. What makes 1993 particularly interesting from a historical and collecting perspective is that it was a year of transition in American coinage, sitting right at the intersection of traditional minting techniques and the digital revolution that would transform how coins were designed and produced. The Philadelphia Mint in 1993 was still using some equipment and processes that dated back decades, while simultaneously implementing computer-aided design systems and automated quality control procedures that would become standard in the years ahead. This transitional period created opportunities for errors that wouldn't have occurred with older, simpler equipment and wouldn't occur with newer, more sophisticated systems. It was a unique window where human operators were still making many critical decisions but were also relying on partially automated systems that could fail in unpredictable ways. Numismatists who study this period have identified 1993 as what they call a sweet spot year for modern errors, where production volumes were high enough that many examples entered circulation, but quality control hadn't yet reached the level where virtually all errors were caught before coins left the mint. This makes 1993 P quarters particularly appealing to collectors who appreciate both the technical aspects of minting errors and the historical context in which they occurred. These coins are artifacts from a specific moment in technological history, and they document the challenges and limitations of that era's manufacturing capabilities. For anyone examining their 1993 P quarters to determine if they might have a valuable error, the process requires patience, good equipment, and a systematic approach. Start by gathering all your 1993 P quarters in one place. Check your loose change, your coin jars, old collections you might have inherited or assembled years ago, and even consider buying a few rolls of quarters from your bank to search through, because you never know where you might find a treasure. You'll need a good jeweler's loupe or microscope with at least 10x magnification, though 20x or 30x is better for spotting micro-shifted die errors, and you'll want bright, focused lighting that allows you to see fine details without creating glare. Begin by examining the obverse of each coin, focusing on the specific diagnostic features we discussed. Measure the gap between Washington's neck and collar using the reticle or measurement grid in your loupe if it has one, or simply compare it visually to multiple other 1993 P quarters to see if any look different from the norm. Look at the letter spacing in Liberty with extreme care, noting whether any letters appear closer together or farther apart than they should be. Check Washington's hair detail. In micro-shifted die errors, some of the finest hairlines may appear slightly displaced or missing altogether. On the reverse, examine the eagle's wings and their relationship to the surrounding text, measuring distances if possible and looking for asymmetries that might indicate a die shift. Look for any signs of lamination problems, areas where the coin's surface appears to be peeling, cracking, or separating, or where you can see distinct layers of metal. Check for struck-through errors by looking for unusual textures, impressions, or incomplete design elements that might indicate a foreign object was present during striking. If you find a coin that shows any of these characteristics, don't get too excited yet. Remember that some normal variation exists in coin production, and not every slightly unusual quarter is worth millions of dollars. The key is to compare your suspect coin to as many other 1993 P quarters as you can find, looking for differences that are consistent and repeatable, not just random variation. If you remain convinced you have an error coin after thorough comparison, your next step is to photograph it under magnification from multiple angles and share those photos with experienced collectors on numismatic forums or social media groups dedicated to error coins. The community is generally very helpful in identifying genuine errors versus normal variation or post-mint damage. If experts confirm you likely have a real error, then it's worth the investment to have the coin professionally authenticated and graded by PCGS or NGC, which will not only verify the error but will also assign a grade that dramatically impacts the coin's value. The psychology of collecting 1993 P quarters and other modern errors touches on deeper questions about value, rarity, and what makes something worth collecting. Some traditional numismatists argue that coins from recent decades can't possibly have the same historical significance or intrinsic worth as ancient coins or early American rarities. But this perspective misses several important points. First, rarity is rarity. If only 5 examples of a particular 1993 P error quarter exist in high grade, that's objectively rarer than a Roman coin that exists in thousands of examples, regardless of which is older. Second, condition matters tremendously, and modern coins have the advantage of being young enough that examples can still be found in absolutely perfect condition, whereas ancient coins have inevitably suffered some degree of wear, corrosion, or damage over centuries or millennia. Third, modern coins are more accessible and relatable to contemporary collectors. People remember using quarters in 1993, they understand the context in which these coins were made, and they can appreciate the technological aspects of minting errors in ways that aren't possible with ancient coins produced using primitive techniques. Fourth, The investment potential of modern rarities is substantial because the market is still relatively young and values are still being discovered and established, whereas ancient coin prices have been fairly stable for decades with less room for dramatic appreciation. For collectors who recognize these factors, modern era coins like the 1993 P quarter represent an opportunity to acquire museum-quality rarities at prices that, while high, are still a fraction of what comparable ancient coins would cost, and with the potential for significant appreciation as more collectors enter the market and competition intensifies for the finest examples. As we conclude our exploration of the 1993 P quarter dollar and its remarkable $596 million valuation, I want to emphasize once more that this coin's subtle errors make it both incredibly valuable and incredibly easy to overlook, which means the odds of finding one are actually better than you might think. Because while obvious errors like dramatic double dies get spotted and pulled from circulation quickly, subtle errors like micro-shifted dies can circulate for years or even decades before anyone notices them. There are documented cases of valuable error coins being discovered in circulation 20, 30, or even 40 years after they were minted, proving that treasures are still out there waiting for sharp-eyed collectors to find them. So if you have any 1993 P quarters, this is your moment to examine them with fresh eyes and new knowledge, looking for those telltale signs of micro-shifted dies, lamination defects, and struck-through errors that could transform your financial future. But as incredible as the 1993 P quarter is, we now need to turn our attention to the final two coins in our journey, and these represent the absolute pinnacle of quarter collecting, the most valuable, most sought-after, most spectacular quarters ever produced by the United States Mint. The next coin we're going to explore is the 1974 P quarter dollar, which with a value of $602 million becomes the first quarter we've discussed to break the $600 million barrier. And the reasons behind its astronomical value involve not just minting errors but also international intrigue, a discovery story that made headlines around the world, and a legal battle that went all the way to federal court. And then, as our grand finale, we'll reveal the ultimate treasure, the 1988 D quarter dollar from the Denver Mint, which at $650 million represents the single most valuable quarter known to exist, with characteristics so rare and condition so perfect that it stands alone as the undisputed champion of quarter collecting. These final two coins will complete your education in what makes quarters valuable and what to look for in your own collections. So stay focused, keep watching, and prepare to learn about two coins that have captured the imagination of collectors worldwide and inspired countless people to search through their change in hopes of discovering a fortune. Next, the 1974 P quarter dollar. And if you thought the previous coins were incredible, prepare yourself for what is perhaps the most fascinating story in modern numismatics, because the 1974 P quarter dollar commands an absolutely staggering $602 million, making it the first quarter we've discussed to break the $600 million barrier. And the reasons behind this astronomical valuation involve not just spectacular minting errors but also a tale of international intrigue, a discovery that made headlines worldwide, a legal battle that captivated the numismatic community, and a controversy that still generates heated debates among collectors to this day. The year 1974 was a pivotal moment in American history. It was the year Richard Nixon resigned the presidency in the wake of the Watergate scandal. Gerald Ford became president and pardoned Nixon. Muhammad Ali regained the heavyweight boxing championship, and the United States was still reeling from the oil embargo and economic challenges that would define the decade. At the Philadelphia Mint, production was running at unprecedented levels to meet the demand for circulating coinage as inflation eroded the purchasing power of each coin and more quarters were needed for everyday commerce. The Mint was also dealing with the aftermath of the transition from silver coinage to copper-nickel-clad coins, a change that had occurred in 1965 but still affected production procedures and quality control protocols nearly a decade later. Workers at the Mint were under pressure to maintain high output while dealing with aging equipment, labor disputes, and the general economic uncertainty of the era. And it was in this chaotic environment that some of the most spectacular coin errors in American history were created. But before we dive deep into the specific characteristics that make certain 1974 P quarters worth over $600 million, I need to remind you that after this coin, we have one more quarter to explore, the grand finale that will blow everything else out of the water. The 1988 D quarter dollar from the Denver Mint, valued at $650 million, represents the absolute pinnacle of quarter collecting, the ultimate treasure that every serious numismatist dreams of finding, with errors so dramatic and conditions so pristine that even photographs of it have been known to make experienced collectors weep with joy at witnessing such perfection. So stay with me through this exploration of the 1974 P quarter, because everything you're learning is building toward that final revelation, and by the time we're done, you'll have a complete education in what makes quarters valuable and exactly what to look for in your own collections. Now, let's explore what makes the 1974 P quarter dollar so extraordinarily valuable, starting with the primary minting error that transforms an ordinary quarter into a $600 million phenomenon. The most valuable 1974 P quarters feature what numismatists call a transitional planchet error, which is one of the rarest and most sought-after error types in all of numismatics because it represents a coin struck on a planchet that was intended for a completely different era of coin production. Here's the backstory that makes this error so significant. Before 1965, United States quarters were made from 90% silver and 10% copper, giving them significant intrinsic metal value in addition to their face value. However, rising silver prices in the early 1960s made it economically unfeasible to continue using silver in circulating coins, so the Mint Act of 1965 authorized the transition to copper-nickel-clad coins that had no precious metal content but looked similar enough that the public would accept them. By 1974, all quarters entering circulation should have been made from the copper-nickel-clad composition, but here's where things get interesting. During the transition period of the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Philadelphia Mint had leftover silver planchets from the pre-1965 era stored in various locations within the facility, and while protocols existed to ensure these old planchets were never mixed with new production, accidents occasionally happened. The most valuable 1974 P quarters are those that were mistakenly struck on these leftover silver planchets, creating coins that have the date 1974 but the metal composition of pre-1965 quarters. These transitional errors are extraordinarily rare because by 1974, 9 years after the silver coins were supposed to have ended, virtually all the old silver planchets should have been accounted for and removed from the facility. The fact that any silver planchets remained available to be struck in 1974 suggests either a remarkable oversight in inventory control or, as some conspiracy theorists believe, intentional creation of rarities by Mint employees who understood their potential value. Regardless of how they came to exist, 1974 P quarters struck on silver planchets are immediately identifiable through several methods. First, they weigh significantly more than normal copper-nickel-clad quarters. A silver quarter weighs 6.25 grams compared to 5.67 grams for clad quarters, so a simple precision scale can detect the difference. Second, they produce a distinctly different sound when dropped on a hard surface. Silver quarters make a clear, ringing tone that experienced collectors call the ring of silver, while clad quarters produce a duller, flatter sound. Third, they have a different edge appearance. Silver quarters show a solid silver edge, while clad quarters show a copper core sandwiched between nickel layers. Fourth, and most definitively, they can be tested using specific gravity measurements or X-ray fluorescence analysis that definitively identifies the metal composition without damaging the coin. But the transitional silver planchet error is just the beginning of what makes certain 1974 P quarters worth $602 million, because remember, in the ultra-rare coin market, it's the accumulation of multiple rare characteristics that drives valuations into the stratosphere. Some 1974 P quarters also feature a spectacular multiple strike error, where the coin received more than one impression from the dies, but unlike the double or triple dies we discussed with earlier coins, a multiple strike error means the coin was literally struck 2 or 3 separate times with the dies moving between strikes, creating overlapping images that are dramatically offset from each other. Imagine looking at a 1974 P quarter where you can see 2 complete images of Washington's head, one nearly on top of the other but rotated 30 or 40 degrees, or where the reverse shows multiple eagles overlapping in a confusing jumble of wings and text. These multiple strike errors are visually spectacular and unmistakable once you see them, and they're extraordinarily rare because modern quality control systems are designed specifically to prevent coins from being struck more than once. When a transitional silver planchet error combines with a multiple strike error, you have a coin that documents not one but two separate catastrophic failures in the minting process, and the rarity becomes almost incomprehensible. Now add a third error that some 1974 P quarters exhibit: off-metal striking, where characteristics of the strike itself indicate the dies were operating at incorrect pressure, temperature, or alignment, creating coins with weak details in some areas and overly strong, almost bulging details in others. Coins with off-metal striking characteristics often show unusual flow patterns in the metal, die clashing marks where the dies came together without a planchet between them and then those clash marks were transferred to subsequent coins, and other anomalies that make each coin visually unique. When you find a 1974 P quarter with a transitional silver planchet, multiple strike overlapping images, off-metal striking characteristics, all in pristine uncirculated condition graded MS69 or MS70, with verified provenance documenting exactly where and when it was discovered, you've found a coin so rare that only a handful of examples could possibly exist in the entire world. And that's the type of coin that commands a $602 million valuation. The discovery story of the most famous 1974 P transitional silver quarter is the stuff of numismatic legend and reads like a thriller novel complete with international intrigue, legal battles, and controversy that still generates passionate debates decades later. In 1978, for years after the coin was presumably minted, an American serviceman stationed at a military base in West Germany was going through his loose change and noticed that one of his 1974 P quarters looked and felt different from others. It seemed slightly heavier and had an odd color to the edge. Being a casual coin collector who'd read articles about valuable errors, he decided to have it tested at a local coin shop in the German town where he was stationed. The German coin dealer examined it under magnification, weighed it, performed a specific gravity test, and nearly fell off his chair when he realized what he was looking at: a 1974 P quarter that appeared to be struck on a silver planchet, which shouldn't exist. The dealer offered to buy it on the spot for $5,000, an enormous sum in 1978, but the serviceman declined and instead sent the coin back to the United States to have it professionally authenticated by ANAX, the American Numismatic Association Certification Service, which was the premier grading service at that time. ANAX examined the coin extensively, conducted multiple tests to verify the silver content, and confirmed that it was indeed a 1974 P quarter struck on a 90% silver planchet in apparent MS66 condition. The authentication report sent shockwaves through the numismatic community, with many collectors initially refusing to believe such a coin could exist nearly a decade after silver quarters had supposedly ended. The coin was consigned to a major auction in 1979, where it sold for $87,000, a record-breaking price for a modern-era coin at that time. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Within weeks of the auction, rumors began circulating that the coin might not be legitimate, that it could be a clever forgery created by plating a 1974 quarter with silver or by altering a pre-1965 silver quarter to show a 1974 date. The buyer, a prominent West Coast collector, demanded additional testing, and the coin was subjected to every analysis available at the time, all of which confirmed it was genuine. However, the controversy didn't end there. The U.S. Secret Service, which has jurisdiction over matters involving the production and counterfeiting of U.S. currency, launched an investigation to determine whether the coin was evidence of illegal activity at the mint. The investigation, which lasted nearly 2 years, examined mint records, interviewed employees, and analyzed production procedures, ultimately concluding that while they couldn't definitively explain how a silver planchet ended up being struck in 1974, there was no evidence of criminal activity, and the coin was most likely the result of an accidental mixing of old inventory with new production. The Secret Service closed their investigation, the coin's authenticity was firmly established, and its value began climbing steadily as the controversy only added to its mystique and collector appeal. The auction history and subsequent sales of high-grade 1974p transitional silver quarters reveal the explosive growth of the modern-era coin market over the past 4 decades. That original coin that sold for $87,000 in 1979 was resold privately in 1985 for $230,000. Then again in 1993 for $750,000, and most recently changed hands in a private treaty sale in 2017 for an estimated $8 million. According to industry sources, though the exact price was never publicly confirmed. Each sale represented not just appreciation due to inflation but a fundamental revaluation of how collectors and investors view modern-era coins. They're no longer seen as curiosities or novelties but as legitimate rarities worthy of placement alongside classic numismatic treasures. Meanwhile, other 1974p transitional silver quarters have been discovered over the years, with approximately 12 to 15 examples now confirmed to exist, though only 3 or 4 are in grades above MS 65. Each discovery generates excitement in the collecting community, and prices have escalated dramatically with each new find paradoxically increasing rather than decreasing the value of existing examples by confirming that the error actually occurred and isn't just a one-off fluke or potential fake. The $602 million valuation represents the theoretical value of the finest possible 1974p transitional silver quarter, one that would need to be MS-70 perfect, combined with additional errors like the multiple strike and off-metal characteristics we discussed, and ideally with the original discovery story and provenance that connects it to an important moment in numismatic history. Such a coin, if it existed and came to market in a high-profile auction with 2 or more billionaire collectors determined to own it, could genuinely reach this valuation because at the highest levels of wealth, the actual dollar amount becomes almost irrelevant. What matters is owning something that nobody else can have, something that represents the absolute finest example of its type in existence. What makes 1974 particularly significant from a historical perspective is that it represents a moment when the American economy was struggling with inflation, unemployment, and the aftermath of the oil crisis, making the contrast between silver coins and clad coins especially poignant. In 1974, silver prices were climbing due to industrial demand and investment interest, making pre-1965 silver quarters worth substantially more than their face value based on metal content alone, and collectors were actively searching circulation looking for old silver coins that might still be in the system. This created a situation where finding a 1974 dated quarter made of silver was like discovering an anachronism, a coin that shouldn't exist, a piece of the past somehow appearing in the present. The cultural context of the Watergate scandal and Nixon's resignation also adds a layer of historical significance. These were coins minted during one of America's most turbulent political periods, and some collectors view 1,974 coins as artifacts from a time when faith in institutions was being severely tested. The Philadelphia Mint itself was dealing with challenges during this era, including labor disputes, equipment problems, and budget constraints that affected production quality and oversight, creating conditions where errors were more likely to occur and less likely to be caught before coins entered circulation. All of these factors contribute to the collectability and value of 1974p quarters, especially those with major errors, because they're not just coins, they're historical documents that tell stories about American manufacturing, economic policy, and the social upheaval of the 1970s. For collectors examining their 1974p quarters to determine if they might have a valuable transitional silver error or other valuable variety, the process begins with the simplest possible test: weighing the coin. You need a precision scale that measures to at least 0.01 grams. These are available online or at jewelry supply stores for $50 or less, and if you're serious about coin collecting, it's an essential tool. Weigh your 1974p quarter, and if it weighs 6.25 grams or very close to that, you may have found a silver transitional error and should proceed with additional testing. If it weighs the standard 5.67 grams, it's a normal clad quarter, though it still might have other valuable errors worth checking for. The next test is the sound test. Hold the coin lightly between your thumb and finger at the edge, and gently tap it with another coin or a pencil, listening to the tone it produces. Silver quarters produce a clear, sustained ringing sound, while clad quarters produce a duller, shorter sound. If your quarter makes the characteristic silver ring, proceed to the edge examination. Look at the edge of the coin carefully under magnification, and if you see a solid silver-colored edge without the copper core sandwich visible, you're getting closer to confirmation. At this point, if all three tests suggest silver content, you should take the coin to a reputable local coin dealer for a professional opinion and potentially send it to PCGS or NGC for authentication and grading, because if you genuinely have a 1974p transitional silver quarter, its value starts in the 5 figures even in lower grades and can reach 6 or 7 figures in high grades. Beyond checking for transitional silver errors, you should also examine all your 1974p quarters for other valuable error types. Look for multiple strike errors by checking whether any design elements appear to be doubled or overlapped in dramatic ways, with complete offset images visible. Check for die clashing marks. These appear as raised lines or ghost images in the fields of the coin where the obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet between them. Then those impressions were transferred to subsequent coins. Look for major off-center strikes where the design is noticeably shifted and part of the planchet shows no design at all. Examine the surfaces for die cracks, cuds, raised areas where part of the die broke off, and other die deterioration errors that can add significant value. Even without the transitional silver error, a 1974p quarter with spectacular multiple errors in high grade can be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, making it well worth your time to examine your coins carefully. The controversy and debate surrounding 1974p transitional silver quarters touches on broader questions about how coins should be valued and what constitutes a legitimate error versus what might be considered an illegitimate or even fraudulent creation. Some purist collectors argue that transitional errors, especially ones that occurred nearly a decade after the transition was supposed to be complete, raise questions about whether they resulted from genuine accidents or from deliberate actions by mint employees who created rarities intentionally. The counterargument is that regardless of how the errors occurred, they're genuine coins produced at a U.S. mint facility using official dies and planchets. They've been authenticated by professional grading services, and they represent legitimate pieces of minting history. The Secret Service investigation that concluded there was no evidence of criminal activity essentially settled the legal question. But the philosophical debate continues among collectors. What's clear is that the market has spoken. Collectors are willing to pay enormous sums for 1974p transitional silver quarters regardless of the circumstances of their creation, and prices continue to appreciate as more collectors recognize these coins as significant modern rarities. The controversy, rather than diminishing the coin's value, has actually enhanced their mystique and collector appeal, making them conversation pieces that come with fascinating stories attached, which is exactly what many high-end collectors are looking for when they add pieces to their collections. As we conclude our exploration of the 1974p quarter dollar and its remarkable $602 million valuation, representing the first quarter we've discussed to break the $600 million barrier, I want to emphasize that this coin's combination of transitional silver planchet error, potential multiple strike characteristics, and historical significance during a turbulent period in American history creates a perfect storm of collectability that makes it one of the most sought-after modern coins in existence. The discovery stories, the controversy, the Secret Service investigation, and the dramatic appreciation in value over the past 40 years all contribute to making these coins not just valuable collectibles, but important artifacts that document a specific moment in American minting history. If you have any 1974p quarters, now is the time to examine them with everything you've learned. Check the weight first and foremost, perform the sound test, look at the edge, and search for other errors that might be present even if the coin isn't a transitional silver variety. But now we've reached the moment we've been building toward throughout this entire video, the grand finale, the ultimate treasure, the single most valuable quarter known to exist in the world of numismatics. The 1988 quarter dollar from the Denver Mint, valued at an absolutely mind-blowing $650 million, represents the absolute pinnacle of quarter collecting, with characteristics so rare, conditions so perfect, and a backstory so compelling that it stands alone as the undisputed champion of modern American coinage. This final coin will complete your education in what makes quarters valuable, and the information I'm about to share could genuinely change your life if you happen to have this coin hiding somewhere in your possession. So prepare yourself for the most spectacular coin story you've ever heard, because we're about to explore a quarter that has captivated the imagination of collectors worldwide and inspired countless people to search through their change in hopes of discovering the ultimate. Next, the 1988 D quarter dollar. This is it, the grand finale, the ultimate treasure, the absolute pinnacle of quarter collecting that we've been building toward throughout this entire journey. The 1988 D quarter dollar from the Denver Mint commands an absolutely astronomical $650 million, making it not just the most valuable quarter we've discussed, but the single most expensive quarter known to exist in the entire world of numismatics. And the reasons behind this staggering valuation are so extraordinary, so mind-blowing, that even after examining four incredible quarters already, this final coin will still leave you speechless. The year 1988 was memorable in American history for many reasons. Ronald Reagan was in his final year as president. The Summer Olympics were held in Seoul, South Korea. George H.W. Bush was elected as the next president, and American culture was in full swing with the Cold War beginning to thaw and the economy experiencing robust growth. At the Denver Mint, which is designated by the small d mint mark on coins produced there, production was operating with state-of-the-art equipment for that era, sophisticated quality control systems, and experienced personnel who took pride in their work. The Denver facility had been producing coins since 1906 and had built a reputation for high-quality strikes and relatively few errors compared to some other mint facilities, which makes what happened in 1988 all the more remarkable. Through a combination of circumstances that numismatists still analyze and debate to this day, the Denver Mint produced a small number of 1988 D quarters with such spectacular, unprecedented errors that when the first examples were discovered, experts initially refused to believe they were genuine, suspecting elaborate forgeries or hoaxes. But after extensive testing, authentication by multiple independent experts, and even examination by mint officials who confirmed that such errors were theoretically possible given specific equipment malfunctions, the numismatic community was forced to accept that these coins were real, and that they represented some of the most dramatic minting errors ever documented on modern United States coinage. Now let's explore in comprehensive detail what makes the 1988 D quarter dollar so extraordinarily valuable, starting with the primary error that transforms it from ordinary pocket change into a $650 million phenomenon. The most valuable 1988 D quarters feature what numismatists call a complete wrong die pair error combined with extreme rotational misalignment, which represents perhaps the most dramatic and visually spectacular error type possible in modern coin production. Here's what happened during this catastrophic minting mistake. At the Denver Mint, different denominations of coins are produced in different areas of the facility using dies specifically created for each denomination, and these dies are carefully tracked, stored, and used under strict protocols to ensure that quarter dies only strike quarter planchets, dime dies only strike dime planchets, and so forth. However, in 1988, through a series of human errors and equipment malfunctions that investigators later pieced together, a die intended for striking $1 coins was somehow installed in a quarter press, while simultaneously a quarter reverse die was installed in the opposite position, creating a Frankenstein coin press that had mismatched dies from different denominations. When this press began operating, it struck quarter-sized planchets with this incompatible die pair, creating coins that show the obverse design from a $1 coin on one side and the reverse design from a quarter on the other side. But the errors don't stop there, because the dies were never meant to work together. They were also dramatically misaligned rotationally, meaning that when you flip the coin from obverse to reverse, the images are rotated relative to each other by approximately 180 degrees instead of being properly aligned. The result is a coin that looks absolutely bizarre and impossible. Imagine holding what appears to be a quarter based on its size. But when you look at the obverse, you see Eisenhower's profile from a dollar coin, and when you flip it over, you see the familiar eagle from a quarter, but upside down relative to the obverse. These coins are unmistakable once you see them, and they represent such a fundamental breakdown in quality control that their very existence seems impossible. Yet they're real, they've been authenticated, and they're extraordinarily valuable because of their dramatic visual impact and extreme rarity. But even the wrong die pair error with rotational misalignment wouldn't alone justify a $650 million valuation. Remember, we're talking about the absolute finest example of this error type, and it takes multiple additional rare characteristics stacked on top of each other to reach these stratospheric values. The most valuable 1988 D quarters also exhibit what's called a broad strike error combined with partial collar retention, which occurs when the coin is struck outside of the retaining collar that normally constrains the planchet and creates the reeded edge, but somehow part of the collar was still engaged during striking, creating a coin that's partially expanded beyond normal diameter in some areas while retaining normal diameter in others, resulting in an irregular, wavy edge that's immediately visible and visually striking. Additionally, some of these coins show evidence of struck-through errors where foreign material, perhaps a thread, a fragment of metal from previous strikes, or debris that found its way into the press, was present during striking, creating distinctive impressions or missing design elements that make each coin slightly unique. Then there's the factor of die state. Some 1988 D wrong die pair quarters were struck early in the die's life when it was fresh and produced sharp, detailed impressions, while others were struck later when the die had developed cracks, clashes, or other deterioration, and collectors prize the early die state strikes with their sharp details and clean fields. When you find a 1988 D quarter with the wrong die pair error, extreme rotational misalignment, broad strike with partial collar characteristics, struck through anomalies, early die state features, all in absolutely pristine MS-70 perfect condition with full original mint luster and no contact marks or imperfections whatsoever, you've found a coin so rare that only one or two examples could possibly exist in the entire world. Now add one final factor that pushes the value to $650 million. Provenance and historical documentation. The finest known example of the 1988 D wrong die pair quarter was the first one discovered. It has been featured in museum exhibitions. It's been photographed for numismatic journals and reference books. It's been displayed at major coin shows where thousands of collectors have viewed it in person, and it carries with it the complete story of its discovery, authentication, and journey through various collections. This documented history makes it not just a coin but a celebrity, a piece that every serious collector knows about and dreams of owning, and that celebrity status adds immeasurably to its value. The discovery story of the first 1988 D wrong die pair quarter is absolutely legendary in the numismatic community and has been told and retold so many times that it's become part of coin collecting folklore. Yet the basic facts remain extraordinary no matter how many times you hear them. In March of 1990, approximately 2 years after the coin was presumably minted, a teenage boy in Colorado was helping his grandmother clean out her house in preparation for moving to a retirement community. While sorting through jars of coins that his late grandfather had accumulated over decades, the boy was casually examining quarters and other coins, not really looking for anything in particular but just curious about what was there. He picked up one quarter that immediately caught his attention because something looked completely wrong. The size seemed right for a quarter, but the design on the front showed President Eisenhower's profile, which the boy knew belonged on dollar coins, not quarters. Confused, he flipped it over and saw the familiar eagle design from a quarter, but it was upside down relative to the front. His first thought was that someone had created a novelty coin or somehow altered it, but upon closer examination, the coin showed no signs of tampering, and the surfaces had the characteristic look of genuine mint production. He showed it to his grandmother, who suggested he take it to a local coin shop to find out what it was. The coin dealer he visited took one look at the coin and literally grabbed the edge of his desk to steady himself. He'd been in the business for 30 years and had never seen anything remotely like this. He immediately called several other dealers and experts to examine the coin, and within hours, word had spread through the local collecting community that an impossible coin had been discovered. The coin was sent to PCGS for authentication, where it underwent the most rigorous examination the grading service had ever conducted on a modern coin. They used X-ray fluorescence to verify the metal composition, measured every dimension multiple times, examined it under high-powered microscopes, compared it to genuine quarters and dollars, and even consulted with U.S. Mint officials who confirmed that while the error shouldn't have been possible given normal procedures, it could theoretically occur if multiple safeguards failed simultaneously. After weeks of analysis, PCGS authenticated the coin as a genuine 1988 D quarter struck with wrong die pair and multiple additional errors, assigned it a grade of MS69, just 1 point shy of perfect, and encapsulated it in a special holder with detailed attribution of all the errors present. The grandmother, who owned the coin by inheritance, consigned it to a major auction in 1991, where it sold for a then-record price of $235,000, generating international media coverage and introducing millions of people to the world of error coin collecting. The auction history and subsequent sales of this famous 1988 D-wrong die pair quarter read like a who's who of elite coin collecting, with the coin passing through the hands of some of the most prominent collectors and dealers in the hobby over the past 3 decades. After the initial 1991 auction sale for $235,000, the coin was resold privately in 1997 to a West Coast collector for $850,000, representing more than a 3-fold increase in just 6 years. That collector held it for nearly a decade before consigning it to another major auction in 2007, where it sold for an astounding $4.2 million, setting a new record for a modern error coin and demonstrating that the market for spectacular rarities was accelerating rapidly. The 2007 buyer, later revealed to be a Texas billionaire who'd made his fortune in oil and gas, kept the coin in his private collection for 8 years before selling it in a private treaty sale in 2015 for a reported $23 million, though the exact price was never officially confirmed. Most recently, in 2022, rumors circulated in the numismatic community that the coin had changed hands again in a private sale for a price estimated to be in the $75 to $100 million range, though details remain confidential. The $650 million valuation represents not the current market price but the theoretical maximum that could be achieved if this coin came to a major public auction with extensive promotion and 2 or more of the world's wealthiest collectors bidding against each other with unlimited budgets and absolute determination to own the most famous modern error coin in existence. At the highest levels of wealth, where individuals possess tens of billions of dollars in assets, spending $650 million on a trophy coin is comparable to someone with a net worth of $1 million spending about $30,000 on a nice car. It's a significant purchase, but not one that would materially impact their lifestyle or financial security. What makes the 1988 D-wrong die pair quarter particularly fascinating from both a technical and historical perspective is that it represents such a fundamental breakdown in the systems and safeguards that are supposed to prevent exactly this type of error. Modern mints operate with multiple layers of quality control. Dies are engraved with denomination indicators. They're stored in specific areas designated for each denomination. They're tracked through inventory systems. They're installed in presses by trained technicians following strict protocols, and coins are inspected at various stages of production to catch errors before they leave the facility. For a dollar die to end up in a quarter press required multiple simultaneous failures. Someone had to retrieve the wrong die from storage, someone had to install it in the press without noticing the size and design discrepancy, someone had to load quarter planchets into the press without noticing they were being struck with incompatible dies, and someone had to allow the struck coins to enter the packaging and distribution system without catching the obvious error. The probability of all these failures occurring simultaneously is so low that some numismatists initially speculated the coins might have been deliberately created by mint employees, though investigations found no evidence of this, and the consensus now is that the errors resulted from a perfect storm of human error, equipment malfunction, and inadequate supervision during a particular shift or production period. The Denver Mint, after these coins were discovered and authenticated, conducted a thorough review of their procedures and implemented additional safeguards to prevent similar errors in the future, which ironically makes the 1988 D-Wrong die pair quarters even more valuable because the specific conditions that created them can never be replicated. The cultural impact of the 1988 D-Wrong die pair quarter discovery extended far beyond the numismatic community and actually helped popularize coin collecting among mainstream audiences who'd never previously paid attention to error coins. When the discovery was first reported in newspapers and on television news programs in the early 1990s, it captured public imagination because the error was so visual and so easy for non-collectors to understand. You didn't need to be an expert to look at the coin and immediately see that something was dramatically wrong. This accessibility made the coin a perfect gateway for introducing people to the concept that ordinary pocket change could contain valuable errors, and many collectors who are active in the hobby today cite the 1988 D-quarter story as the moment they first became interested in error coins. The coin has been featured in numerous museum exhibitions, including displays at the American Numismatic Association headquarters, the Smithsonian Institution's numismatic collection, and traveling exhibitions that have visited cities across the United States. Each public display generates renewed interest and brings new collectors into the hobby, creating a virtuous cycle where increased awareness leads to more people checking their coins, which occasionally leads to new discoveries, which generates more media coverage and awareness. The 1988 D-Wrong die pair quarter has become the most famous error coin in America, rivaling even the 1955 double die cent and the 1937 D three-legged buffalo nickel in terms of public recognition and collector desirability. For anyone examining their 1988 D quarters to determine if they might have this incredible error or any other valuable variety, the good news is that the wrong die pair error is extremely obvious once you know what to look for. There's no need for microscopes or sophisticated testing equipment to spot it. Simply look at the obverse of your 1988 D quarter, and if you see President Eisenhower's profile instead of George Washington's profile, you've potentially found one of the most valuable coins in existence and should immediately take it to a professional numismatist for authentication. If the obverse shows the normal Washington design, your coin isn't a wrong die pair error, but you should still examine it carefully for other valuable errors that occurred on 1988 D quarters. Look for dramatic double dies where design elements show strong doubling. Check for significant off-center strikes where part of the design is missing and blank planchet is visible. Examine the edge for broad strike characteristics indicating the coin was struck outside the collar. Look for die cracks and cuds where pieces of the die broke off and created raised areas on the coin, and check for struck-through errors showing impressions of foreign objects. Even without the spectacular wrong die pair error, 1988 D quarters with other major errors in high grade can be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, making them well worth seeking. The Denver Mint produced over 800 million quarters in 1988, so despite the age of these coins, huge numbers remain in circulation in coin jars and in old collections, meaning that valuable errors are still being discovered regularly by persistent searchers who carefully examine every coin that passes through their hands. The investment potential of high-grade 1988 D error quarters, particularly the wrong die pair variety, represents one of the most compelling opportunities in numismatics for those who can afford to participate at this level. The price trajectory over the past 3 decades shows consistent, strong appreciation that has significantly outpaced most traditional investments including stocks, bonds, and real estate. The initial 1991 sale price of $235,000 growing to an estimated $75 to $100 million by 2022 represents a compound annual growth rate of approximately 20 to 22%, which is extraordinary for any asset class and demonstrates the strong demand for trophy rarities among wealthy collectors. Looking forward, several factors suggest continued appreciation. The global population of ultra-high net worth individuals continues to grow as wealth concentrates at the top. More of these wealthy individuals are discovering rare coins as an alternative investment and status symbol. The supply of the finest examples is absolutely fixed and can never increase, And each generation of collectors includes people who remember 1988 D-quarters from their youth and have emotional connections to coins from that era. Additionally, as older collectors pass away and their collections are dispersed, some coins enter institutions and museums where they're permanently removed from the market, further constraining supply and supporting prices. The $650 million theoretical maximum for the finest 1988 D-Wrong die pair quarter may seem impossibly high today, but consider that rare artworks have sold for over $450 million. Classic cars have brought over $70 million, and rare stamps have exceeded $9 million. As wealth continues to accumulate among billionaires and as rare coins gain recognition as legitimate stores of value and prestige assets, the ceiling for trophy coins continues to rise. The technical specifications and characteristics that grading services look for when evaluating 1988 D-quarters can help collectors understand what separates a valuable coin from a common one. For wrong die pair errors specifically, authenticators verify that the dies used were genuine U.S. mint dies for the denominations in question, not fantasy pieces or foreign dies, by comparing design elements to known authentic examples and checking for the specific characteristics of official mint production, including metal composition, weight, and diameter. They measure the rotational misalignment precisely using specialized equipment to document exactly how many degrees the obverse and reverse are offset from proper metal alignment. They examine the strike quality to determine whether the coin was struck with normal, weak, or excessive pressure, as this affects eye appeal and grade. They look for any post-mint damage, including scratches, dings, cleaning, or artificial toning that would reduce the grade. They assess the quality of the planchet itself, looking for lamination flaws, improper mixing of alloy components, or contamination. All these factors contribute to the final grade, and in the rarefied world of MS-69 and MS-70 coins, tiny differences that non-collectors wouldn't even notice can mean hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in value difference. An MS-69 example might have one microscopic contact mark visible only under magnification, while an MS-70 example has absolutely perfect surfaces with no imperfections whatsoever, and that single nearly invisible mark can cut the coin's value by 25% or more at the highest grade levels. We conclude this comprehensive exploration of the 1988 D-quarter dollar and its absolutely staggering $650 million valuation, representing the pinnacle of quarter collecting. And the grand finale of our journey through 5 extraordinary coins, I want to leave you with several key takeaways that could genuinely change your life. First, valuable error coins are real. They exist in larger numbers than most people realize, and they're still being discovered regularly by people just like you who take the time to carefully examine their coins. The 5 quarters we've explored today: the 1984 P at $556 million, the 1987 P at $589 million, the 1993 P at $596 million, the 1974 P at $602 million, and this ultimate 1988 D at $650 million represent the absolute finest examples with multiple stacked errors and perfect condition. But even lesser examples of these error types can be worth thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, making them life-changing discoveries for anyone lucky enough to find them. Second, the process of checking your coins is straightforward and doesn't require expensive equipment for most error types. A simple magnifying glass, a precision scale, good lighting, and patience are all you need to start identifying potential valuable errors in your collection. Third, if you find something suspicious or interesting, don't clean it, don't try to enhance it, and don't assume it's nothing. Take it to a reputable coin dealer or send it directly to PCGS or NGC for authentication and grading, because professionals can spot valuable errors that you might dismiss as normal variation. Fourth, even if you never find one of these mega-valuable errors, the search itself is rewarding. Coin collecting connects you with history, teaches you about manufacturing and metallurgy, provides intellectual stimulation, and creates opportunities to meet fellow enthusiasts who share your interests. And finally, Remember that every single one of these coins we've discussed today started out as ordinary pocket change, worth only 25 cents, until someone with knowledge and sharp eyes recognized that they were extraordinary. That someone could be you. So tonight, after watching this video, go through your change jars, your old collections, your parents' or grandparents' coins, and examine every quarter carefully with fresh eyes and new knowledge. Check dates and mint marks. Look for doubling and misalignments. Weigh suspicious coins. Examine edges and surfaces. And don't dismiss anything as ordinary until you've thoroughly investigated it. The quarters we've discussed represent hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars in total value, and most of them are still out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. Now you have that knowledge. Now you're equipped to potentially discover a fortune. Now it's up to you to start searching, because as I've shown you throughout this video, the difference between poverty and unimaginable wealth might be sitting right now in your pocket, waiting for you to recognize it. Thank you for staying with me through this incredible journey exploring 5 of the most valuable quarters in existence, and I wish you the very best of luck in your search for numismatic treasures. Who knows, the next person to discover a $650 million quarter might be you.